So for a long time, back row has been a real strong position for Wales, and with some new faces emerging this season and some older faces to return, I wanted to look at who could potentially get picked by Warren Gatland and who I personally would pick. My name's Christian and this is the Welsh Sports Podcast. So similar to my video I did recently about centres and the partnerships, I'll go through the players in the back row and then I'll go with who I think Gatland's going to pick and who I would personally pick. So first of all, I'll start with the returning Jack Morgan. Obviously, he was going to be a big loss when he got injured going into this year's Six Nations. We were sort of wondering whether Rafael was going to be able to step up and fill the boots, because Jack Morgan has been a real revelation since he got given the captaincy last year and cemented his position in the team, and he's definitely put himself up as one of the world-class players in this team. He can basically do everything. He can tackle, he can carry, he can kick. He's not the biggest Gatland threat at 7, but he's definitely got in his game. But I think the rest of his game is so good that it doesn't really matter that he's not the biggest jackler of the ball. What's going to be interesting moving forward now is if Gatland returns the captaincy to Jack Morgan or if he leaves it with Dav Jenkins, who definitely put his hand up in the last year's Six Nations, especially with personal performances. Maybe still a bit young for the captaincy, who knows, but will he just return it to Jack Morgan? Because Jack Morgan is clearly someone who he likes. He gave him the opportunity to captain the team in the World Cup when there was more senior players that could have done the job, so he obviously thinks a lot of him. Interestingly though, he's going to have a rival for that 7 jersey, and that is obviously Tommy Rafael, who has been absolutely world class in this year's Six Nations. He was the highest turnovers in the entire tournament. He levelled the all-time turnover record in the tournament, so he really put a massive performance in, and to me he's almost made himself undroppable. There's probably no one better in European rugby at the moment at that jackal, and just fetching the ball and making turnovers and just knowing the right time to get the ball when the ball's out of the ruck and stuff like that. His vision for that and his timing are just absolutely unbelievable. Not the most attacking player going forward, and that's definitely something that's hindered him. Although he's definitely improved on that, he's not the biggest, and he's not the biggest ball carrier, and that's where Jack Morgan definitely eclipses him with his world-class ball carrying. But you have to say, Rafael has really put his hands up, and he's going to make it really difficult to make a decision for Gatland. There's literally nothing between them. Age-wise, they're both 24, Rafael 14 caps, Morgan 15, so there's no one you can say who's more experienced. You just have to maybe pick what type of player you want in that 7 jersey. But there is another 7 that could potentially be in and around the squad, and that is Taine Basham, also 24, lots of 24-year-olds there, also on 17 caps. Now, Basham he's a little bit become the forgotten man in some ways. He sort of burst onto the scene in 2021 under PVAC, and he was very destructive in his ball carrying, and he gets around the pitch, and he's very noticeable when he's on the pitch. The issue Basham has got, I think, particularly at 7, he's not the biggest Gatland threat. I just don't think his general ruck play is the best. And at flanker, he's looking more to carry rather than to do dirty work. And that is something that has been an issue in his game, I think. Also, he's been a little bit inconsistent, particularly for the Dragons, though his form has improved in the last couple of games. But I think at one point, he was probably one of the first names on the team sheet, particularly under PVAC. But now he's sort of on the outside looking in, and with the emergence of the other 2 7s, I think he's going to have to probably look at 6 if he wants to get in the team. That's where I would pick him if I wanted him in the team. I just don't think he's enough of a good operator around the ruck time to be a 7, even though his ball carrying is very destructive and very explosive. But I'd like to see him have a good run of form now going into the end of this season. His contract's up with the Dragons at the end of the season. Apparently rumours that he may go to the Scarlets, which would be interesting, but it would be a big loss for the Dragons. But anyway, I think he's definitely always going to be someone who's in and around that squad because of his athletic ability, his ability to play anywhere across the back row. But I definitely think he's someone Gatland will take a look at, but it's going to be really difficult for him to definitely get in front of either Rafael or Morgan. And while we're talking about 24-year-old players, I might as well add another one to the fray, and that is Taine Plumtree. Now, Plumtree is sort of a different option to the other sixes that we have. He's 6'5", which is obviously pretty tall, and he can play anywhere across the back row, but 6, in my opinion, is his best position. He's a really good line-out operator, and that's where I think he'll have an advantage over some of these other players in the back row. He's a big dude, but he's quite rangy. He's a different sort of body type to other players that we've got at the moment. He's been really unfortunate with injuries. Obviously, he joined the Scarlets this season, and Gatland brought him straight into the World Cup warm-up, where he got injured, and then he started playing for the Scarlets and got injured pretty early, and he's been out more or less all of the season. So he's been very unfortunate, because he's obviously come over here looking to play for Wales and stuff like that. So he's been very unlucky. So I think a run of games will do him good. I think probably next year now we need to see him play for the Scarlets more than anything, and then maybe he can get a look in with Wales. He's a little bit erratic when you see him play. There's a lot of effort, but I think the core skills could do with a little bit of sharpening up. But that is obviously something that's more easy to work on than your size, and his size is just really good for that 6. He's sort of that tall second row type back rower at 6 seems to be in vogue at the moment. So I think that is a benefit for him. So he's had 2 caps, and I think there'll be more to come. We just need to give him a bit of luck with injuries, and then I think he can get some form and compete for a position. Another player who's been a little bit unlucky with injuries is Alex Mann. Now, I always just sing Alex Mann's praises. I've loved him from the first time I seen him for Cardiff, and I think he's got better and better and better. There's been a few, I wouldn't say criticisms, but a few people have said his size is maybe an issue at international level, because he's not the biggest 6 around, and I would tend to agree with that. He is a good line-out option though. At 6'3", he's got really good hands, and he's clearly got leadership qualities. He captained the under-20s at one point, and he is one of those players who's got that doggedness. You see him play for Cardiff, and you've seen it for Wales. He's just getting those low tackles. He's hitting rucks. He just flies about the place. He just seems like he loves tackling. His tackle selection is superb. And I completely forgot until I think Andrew Ford did a video of all the best tackles in the Six Nations, of that tackle against Scotland. I think it was on Hugh Jones, as Scotland were probably going to run the whole length of the pitch, and he sort of dived and double ankle tapped in. It's just a thing of beauty. But I think Mann is a great player who's going to be a great player going forward. He is going to put a bit more bulk on. That's something that Gatland has definitely mentioned. He said he'd like to see him put on a couple of kgs, and I think he will. As I've said in previous videos, you see a lot of players mention about his professionalism and how hard he works and things like that, and it seems like he seems the type of player who's very intelligent, and when you say to him, right, I need you to go away and work on this, that's something he's definitely going to do, and he's going to be an absolute animal, I think, if he manages to put on another couple of kilos. I really rate him. His play style reminds me of a Dan Lydiate. He just lacks the size that Lydiate has. So keep an eye on him developing over the next 2 or 3 years. He just seems like a Gatland player to me. And I have to apologise quickly, by the way. I've got a bit of a stinking cold coming, so if I'm sniffing or the audio's rubbish, I do apologise. Now, putting the flankers to the side, there's a lot of those players that can play across the back row, which is obviously useful for them. Plumtree, probably Tshiunza, Jack Morgan and Basham. So you could sort of pick your poison on where you want them, but I think they're generally 6s and 7s is their best position. But we will move on to the 8s. And obviously I'm going to have to start with Toby Faletau if we're talking about the 8s. Now, he's always been one of my favourite players. I absolutely love him. The way he plays, he just seems so modest, humble, a lovely dude. and he has been world class throughout his entire career. I can't ever think of a time where you think of Faletau and think he's had a real run of bad form. Obviously, everyone has those games, but he's never had a long period where he's been like that. I worry at 33 that he's picked up a lot of injuries over the last couple of years, and they've been injuries that have put him out for a long time. The one thing I will say, though, is it hasn't affected him when he's come back. Like, you think of how long he was laid off before the World Cup, and he came in sort of in the World Cup. He didn't have any warm-up games, and Gatland gave him every opportunity during that training camp and stuff like that. And when he came back in, he didn't look like he hadn't been playing. He looked like he'd been playing like a week or two before. He's just a superb professional pro and athlete. Now, the word on the street is that he's quite close to a return for Cardiff, which is a good thing. I'd like to see him get a couple of games towards the end of the season. We can sort of measure where he is, and then perhaps go on the summer tour, whether you want to start him or keep him on the bench or something, and just get him in and around that environment. And then we can see whether he's needed to sort of start starting games, and if he's still got the legs and stuff like that. I think he will. I have all faith that he'll come back and he'll be just quality like he always is. And if so, he, to me, instantly commands to start again and help develop that young team, because even though Wainwright's been superb during the Six Nations, I don't think he's got that carrying that Faletau has. And I mean, that's no disrespect. Faletau is world class and always has been, and he's always played 8, whereas Wainwright is more of a converted 6 to 8. And as we're on Wainwright, we might as well talk about him. He's still very young, because you think he's been around for a long time. He's only 26 and he's got 45 caps now, so experienced. He's been in the successful era of Welsh Rugby, and also, this current period where we've been less successful, should we say, on the pitch. And he's always performed. I was a little bit out on him at the start of his career. I thought he was quite an average player who did a bit. But as he's got more senior and had the backing of Gatland, who seems to clearly love him, he's grown into that role, especially since he's been playing 8. He's taken responsibility in games. I was saying before the Six Nations that I really want to see him grab a game by the scruff, and he did in that Scotland game, where he sort of took it upon himself to help us get us some go forward. He runs tirelessly. He's so fit and so athletic, and he always runs hard. And his contribution this Six Nations is commendable. He's been really, really one of the better players in a poor team, or a poorish team. But I don't think he's got just that ability that Faletau has, unfortunately. I think Faletau's just got that next gear up. But obviously that could see him playing at 6, and I don't know if that's something he wants to do. I think he's pretty set on playing at 8, he said. But if we have to play him at 6, that gives us a lot more carrying between him and Faletau at 8. And that is something that we've desperately needed, because Wainwright's been pretty much doing exclusively most of the carrying in that forward pack all on his own. So I think if we did move him to 6 and brought Faletau in, then that really takes the pressure off him, and it could potentially give him that level up again and take a bit of the defender's limelight away from him, and that could open up some more space for him. So it'll be interesting to see what Gatland wants to do if Faletau is fit and rearing and ready to go, and whether he sticks with Wainwright, who's definitely announced himself as the successor when Toby finally knocks it on the head, or is just not good enough to do it. So yeah, Wainwright is, I don't want to put him down at all, because I think he had a superb Six Nations, and I think he's definitely going to be competing for 8 or 6. And then finally, finishing off the number 8s, we've got Big Mac, Mackenzie Martin. He's only 20, which is crazy when you see the size of him. He's like 6'5", 18 stone, no problem, like no issues. He's sort of one of those players, I think he still needs a bit of nurturing. Very strong carrying. He's got all of the minerals to be a top quality player. I think he needs to clean up his sort of just basic stuff. Watching a lot of him for Cardiff, and I think his ruck clear outs are not the best. I'm not saying he's lazy or anything, but he's not running and blasting. And I think at the international level, you can't sort of afford to do that. Maybe when he's like in the sort of younger under-20s playing for Cardiff and Cardiff RFC, I think you can afford to not be so intense when you're that size. But at the top level, you need that intensity all the time, and that is just something he will learn. There's no doubt. He's got all the qualities. Another one who seems quite humble. And he's definitely going to learn from being around Toby Faletau, is someone who he's mentioned multiple times was his favourite player and one of his idols growing up, and he just gets to work with him every day, which is great when you think of that. And who's better to learn about playing number 8 from in Wales than Toby Faletau? So I think Mackenzie Martin will be the number 8 in the future, going forward maybe in 3 or 4 years. I think he just needs to play some time. At the end of the day, he's only played about 8 or 9 games for Cardiff, and he's been in the Wales squad and playing games for Wales, which is insane. But I think he's going to be the man in the future. I just still think it's a little bit early for him at the moment. Now, before I go on and pick what I think Gatland's back row will be, and then see what I would pick in my back row, I'll do some honourable mentions. These are some players within or out of the region that maybe deserve an opportunity or might get an opportunity, or might not get an opportunity but deserve it. So there's obviously one place to start, and that's Morgan Morris, who's been superb again this season. He was man of the match last week again. He's just unbelievable for the Ospreys. I don't know what Gatland doesn't see in him that he doesn't like, but I think if he was going to get called up, it would have been in that World Cup squad, because it was such a big squad and Gatland had a look at so many players, and yet he didn't look at Morris. It showed recently when Morris has been injured how much the Ospreys missed him, and I know a lot of Ospreys fans calling for him in the comments all the time, saying he deserves a spot in the Welsh team and he should, and I agree, but maybe it's unfortunate for him, but maybe as Ospreys fans, count yourselves lucky that at least he's going to be playing week in, week out for you, because he's not away on international duty. So just think of it that way, guys. Another Ospreys player, Morgan Morse, he's going to be in the setup going forward. Maybe still a bit early for him at the moment. He's obviously he was part of the under-20s campaign in the last Six Nations. He definitely is ready for senior rugby, maybe not ready for the step up in internationals yet. Still got lots to learn, but he's incredible, isn't he? He's definitely going to be an international player going forward. It's just a matter of time, but there's no point rushing him because we've got players in that position, and let's nurture him through and let him learn at just regional level for now. An interesting one who I've quite liked the look of at 6 staying at the Ospreys is Rhys Davis. I'm not one of these people who are a big fan of playing second rows at 6, but watched him a few times in that position, and he seems to be really good at sniffing the ball, Gatland. He's got that feel of Courtney Laws around him, where he's got those long levers and he's leaning over and using those long arms to get on the ball. He's won quite a lot of penalties at 6 for the Ospreys when he's played there. Maybe if he can bring that into his second row game, then he might get a look at the national team, because he's a big dude. He's a bit of an enforcer, and if he can consistently be pinching ball from the opposition, he's going to be impossible to ignore. So I just thought that was an interesting one. I think that's an outside bet, but you never know. Moving on to some of the Cardiff players, you got Botham, who was in and around. Well, he started against Scotland. Unfortunately for him, got injured. But I don't want to be disrespectful to James Botham, but I think he was more of a stopgap while there was other players that weren't available. And now, if we've got these players, your Mans, if your Plumtrees come back, or maybe Basham's, forming continues to improve, or Wainwright has to play 6, I don't think Botham's going to be near the team, unfortunately. His benefit is he's very, very versatile. He's got a bit of dog in him. He can play across anywhere in the back row. But I just think that's I think his opportunity was this Six Nations due to the different things with the squad, and I don't know if we're going to see him in and around it again anytime soon, but he is an outside bet. Another two outside bets is Ellis Jenkins and Thomas Young. Ellis Jenkins has had his opportunities, obviously. I don't think he's going to get a look in, but he's having a pretty decent season. But no, I think Thomas Young's having an absolutely superb season. He hasn't, another one who hasn't really got a look in recently, and he didn't in that World Cup squad, and I don't know why he didn't for the Six Nations. Obviously, Gatland doesn't have him in his plans. Maybe his age, because he's up there in his early 30s. He thinks there's no point building a team around him, but when you watch him in any game he's in, he's the player who's in and around absolutely everything, and he's probably the fastest back rower in Wales. He's just so rapid, scores a lot of tries, gets a lot of turnovers. He's just a dog who's in amongst it, and I think he's just been unlucky that he's never really had much of an opportunity for Wales. Moving on, we got Harrison Keddy. I like Keddy. I think he's another one who's got that dogged edge. He's quite a big guy who for 7, which is sort of different to the other options we got at 7. Even though Jack Morgan's a strong player, Keddy's got that real size, and he's got that sort of that grit, which I like at 7. Not the biggest Gatland threat, but I think a good bit of form from him, especially if Basham leaves and he gets a run in at 7, then I think he could be definitely in the view of Gatland, because he's a real gnarly player, and I really rate Harrison Keddy. And then moving on to the Scarlets finally, Josh McLeod would probably have had opportunities if he could just stay fit, but I feel so sorry for the guy. He just can't stay fit ever, and it's never small injuries, it's always really bad injuries. I think he's out now for the rest of the season again, and it's just so unfortunate. No player deserves that type of stuff to happen to them, and I think he would have had lots more opportunities for Wales if his body had held up, but unfortunately it didn't. But we'll never rule him out, because he's got the ability if he can just stay fit, but I just don't see him being able to, unfortunately, which is terrible, really. But we'll move on, and that is the Carwyn Tuipulotu. I don't rate him personally. He gets a lot of hype, and I just don't see why. Obviously, he's a big lump. They made a big effort to get him into the Scarlets Academy and stuff like that, and even at the start of this season, this is the season where he's going to burst through and he's going to be the man, and we've heard it for 3 or 4 years now, and he's never managed to pull it off, and I don't see that changing, to be honest. He's not really impressed me, particularly in the last couple of games where I've seen him play. Just seems like, I don't want to see there's a lack of effort, but it just feels like there's a lack of effort. I'm not sure. I mean, I could be completely wrong, but I just think, unfortunately, he's more hype than he's performed on the pitch. But I'm sure some Scarlets fans will argue with me in the comments about that, and I'd be happy to be proven wrong, because he's got all of the natural minerals to be a quality player, and something that Wales need. He's just never managed to put it together consistently for long enough, I don't think. Now, moving on again, I want to just give my opinion on who I think the back row will be, what I think Gatland might do. I think, and if we take it for granted that everyone is fit, I think he will go with Faletau at 8, Jack Morgan at 7, and I think he'll go Wainwright at 6 for that balance. That leaves out Tommy Reffell, who doesn't deserve to be left out, in my opinion, but it's that balance that we've tried 2 7s in the past. It's not necessarily worked, and I think Gatland might stick with Wainwright, who's someone who he clearly trusts, and I think he will bring Jack Morgan straight back in, and same for Toby Faletau, a player that he trusts, and I think that's the back row. If he was picking everyone fit, I think that's what he would go for. I'm going to go against my normal judgment, and I would always, not always, but generally say don't pick 2 sevens. It doesn't very often work. I mean, we saw it with Tipperick and Warburton, who were 2 world-class sevens, and even though Warburton was an animal, it didn't necessarily have the same impact when he was at 6. So usually I wouldn't pick 2 sevens, but I'm going to, because I just think Rafael deserves it. He is someone who has just got something different than no one else has in this team, and that is that stealability of the ball. Getting the ball just in our possession or winning penalties, and it's something that no player in that team offers it to his level. And also the fact that Jack Morgan is world class, I think it's almost impossible to leave him out too. It's just we don't have many world class players, but both of them play 7, which is unfortunate. And they are 2 different players, and I do think that Jack Morgan has the physicality to play at 6. It's not natural. He doesn't play like a natural 6, but he does have that physicality. And I think we might be able to get away with it. And I would certainly like to see it more. I think we saw it in one of the World Cup games where it looked like it could work, and then against Argentina it was a bit more disjointed. But maybe that was because Faletau wasn't there. I'm not too sure. Also very harsh on Wainwright to leave Wainwright out. But I just think Jack Morgan, Rafael and Faletau are all world class, and it's no disrespect to Wainwright because he's getting there, but he's not quite world class at the moment. And like I said, we've got so few world class players at the moment. We need to get as many in the team as possible. Usually I would say keep Rafael on the bench, and you've got a world class player to bring on, which I think people in the comments might see. But I just think we need to get both of them on the pitch and see if it works. If it doesn't, and you play the summer tour as those 2 in the flankers, and it doesn't work, then let's try something else. But for now, give him the opportunity, see if Jack Morgan can play 6 consistently, and we'll see what happens. But when you look at that back row room, they're all really young. Majority of them are 24 and below. The oldest is Faletau, obviously, with 33, and the next one is Wainwright, who's 27, and then everyone is 24, 22, and 20. So, we're going through a transition, but when you look, there's young players there, and now they've got a few caps under their belts, and with the older statesman Faletau to bring them through, the future's bright in the Welsh back row to continue that proud lineage of having quality back rowers. So that's all from me. Subscribe. I'll catch you on the next one.